How's everyone doing? It's like I've been reading this book that I found very valuable, and especially valuable in these times of uncertainty and lack of, where so many people are thinking of lack. And the book is the Prosperity Bible, and basically this book is the 19 of the most best books on prosperity. And it excludes anything that was written in recent history, but a lot of these books were written in the 30s or the 40s or the 50s, and some of them are just stories. And includes one of the books, Think and Grow Rich, which is an amazing book by Napoleon Hill. This book, I'm going to read a little bit of an excerpt just because I feel inspired and called to do so, and hopefully you get some value from it and you enjoy it, and it's something that you can apply to to your life. And it's just something different from what I usually post as well, so I hope adds some value to you. And if you like the reading or want me to read something else, maybe it's something I will be inspired to do more, but definitely open to feedback. But the book is The Game of Life and How to Play It. It's written by Florence Scovel Shinn, and it was written in 1925. And the first chapter, I'm just going to read probably a couple, maybe less than 10 pages here, but I really get a lot of value from reading out loud, just because it helps ingrain the material in your subconscious mind. And what's also great about it is you just hear it differently because you read it and then you're hearing it. And so there's a lot of value in especially reading books out loud, especially when you're really trying to absorb it as much as you can subconsciously. And then one little bonus tip with reading, if you don't understand a word, one, you could stop reading right there and look up the word and look up the definition. Or you can, underline it or write the word down and look it up later. But it just helps you give you more context to what you're reading, especially some of these older books. Like some of the words that are used are not as commonly used today. And the more you expand your vocabulary, the more you learn, the more you're going to be able to communicate better and get what you want easier and just get everything that you want out of life. So first chapter, it's called The Game. Most people consider life a battle, but it is not a battle. It is a game. It is a game, however, which cannot be played successfully without the knowledge of spiritual law. And the Old and New Testaments give the rules of the game with wonderful clearness. Jesus Christ taught that it was a great game of giving and receiving. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. This means that whatever man sends out in the word or deed will return to him. What he gives, he will receive. If he gives hate, he will receive hate. If he gives love, he will receive love. If he gives criticism, he will receive criticism. If he lies, he will be lied to. If he cheats, he will be cheated. We are taught also that the imaging faculty plays a leading part in the game of life. Keep thy heart or imagination with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Proverbs 4:23. This means that what man images, sooner or later externalizes in his affairs. I know of a man who feared a certain disease. It was a very rare disease and difficult to get, but he pictured it continually and read about it until it manifested in his body, and he died, the victim of distorted imagination. So we see, to play successfully the game of life, we must train the imaging faculty a person with an imaging faculty trained to image only good brings into his life every righteous desire of his heart. Health, wealth, love, friends, perfect self-expression, his highest ideals. The imagination has been called the scissors of the mind, and it is ever cutting day by day the pictures man sees there, and sooner or later he meets his own creations in his outer world. It's the Prosperity Bible. To train the imagination successfully, man must understand the workings of his mind. The Greeks said, "Know thyself." There are three departments of the mind: the subconscious, conscious, and superconscious. The subconscious is simply power without direction. It is like steam or electricity, and it does what it is directed to do. It has no power of induction. Whatever man feels deeply or images clearly is impressed upon the subconscious mind and carried out in minutest detail. For example, a woman I know, when a child, always made believe she was a widow. She dressed up in black clothes and wore a long black veil, and people thought she was very clever and amusing. She grew up and married a man with whom she was deeply in love. In a short time, he died, and she wore black and weeping veil for many years. The picture of herself as a widow was impressed upon the subconscious mind, and in due time worked itself out, regardless of the havoc created. The conscious mind has been called mortal or carnal mind. It is the human mind and sees life as it appears to be. It sees death, disaster, sickness, poverty, and limitation of every kind. And it impresses the subconscious. The superconscious mind is the God mind, within each man, and is the realm of perfect ideas. In it is the perfect pattern spoken of by Plato, the divine design, for there is a divine design for each person. There is a place that you are to fill and no one else can fill, something you are to do which no one else can do. There is a place that you are to fill and no one else can fill, something you are to do which no one else can do. There is a perfect picture of this in the superconscious mind. Usually flashes across the conscious as an unattainable ideal, something too good to be true. In reality, it is man's true destiny or destination flashed to him from the infinite intelligence which is within himself. Many people, however, are in ignorance of their true destinies and are striving for things and situations which do not belong to them, and would only bring failure and dissatisfaction if attained. For example, a woman came to me and asked me to speak the word that she would marry a certain man with whom she was very much in love. She called him A.B. I replied that this would be a violation of spiritual law, but that I would speak the word for the right man, the divine selection, the man who belonged to her by divine right. I added, if A.B. is the right man, you can't lose him, and if he isn't, you will receive his equivalent. She saw A.B. frequently, but no headway was made in their friendship. One evening she called and said, "Do you know, for the last week, A.B. hasn't seemed so wonderful to me." I replied, "Maybe he is not the divine selection. Another man may be the right one." Soon after that, she met another man who fell in love with her at once, and who said she was his ideal. In fact, he said all the things that she had always wished A.B. would say to her. She remarked it was quite uncanny. She soon returned his love and lost all interest in A.B. This shows the law of substitution. A right idea was substituted for a wrong one. Therefore, there was no loss or sacrifice involved. Jesus Christ said, "Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." And he said the kingdom was within man. The kingdom is the realm of right ideas, or the divine pattern. Jesus Christ taught that man's words played a leading part in the game of life. By your words ye are justified, and by your words ye are condemned. Many people have brought disaster into their lives through idle words. For example, a woman once asked me why her life was now one of poverty or of limitation. Formerly, she had a home, was surrounded by beautiful things, and had plenty of money. We found she had often tired of the management of her home and had said repeatedly, "I'm sick and tired of things. I wish I lived in a trunk." And she added, "Today, I am living in that trunk." She had spoken herself into a trunk. The subconscious mind has no sense of humor, and people often joke themselves into unhappy experiences. For example, a woman who had a great deal of money joked continually about getting ready for the poorhouse. In a few years, she was almost destitute, having impressed the subconscious mind with a picture of lack and limitation. Fortunately, the law works both ways, and a situation of lack may be changed to one of plenty. For example, a woman came to me one hot summer's day for a treatment for prosperity. She was worn out, dejected, and discouraged. She said she possessed just $8 in the world. I said, "Good, we'll bless the $8 and multiply them as Jesus Christ multiplied the loaves and the fishes." For he taught that every man had the power to bless and multiply, to heal and to prosper. She said, "What shall I do next?" I replied, "Follow intuition. Have you a hunch to do anything or to go anywhere? Intuition means intuition, or to be taught from within. It is man's unerring guide. I will deal more fully with its laws in a following chapter." The woman replied, "I don't know. I seem to have a hunch to go home. I've just enough money for car fare." Her home was in a distant city and was one of lack and limitation, and the reasoning mind, or intellect, would have said, "Stay in New York and get work and make some money." I replied, "Then go home. Never violate a hunch." I spoke the following words for her: "Infinite Spirit, open the way for great abundance for..." Her name, right? It's just blank. "She is an irresistible magnet for all that belongs to her by divine right." I told her to repeat it continually also. She left for home immediately. In calling on a woman one day, she linked up with an old friend of her family. So, Infinite Spirit, open the way for great abundance for Josh. He is an irresistible magnet for all that belongs to him by divine right. Right, and you can replace your name in that affirmation there. Through this friend, she received thousands of dollars in a most miraculous way. She has said to me often, "Tell people about the woman who came to you with $8 and a hunch." There is always plenty on man's pathway, but it can only be brought into manifestation through desire, faith, or the spoken word. Jesus Christ brought out clearly that man must make the first move. "Ask, and it shall be given to you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you." Matthew 7:7. In the scriptures we read, "Concerning the works of my hands, command ye me." Infinite intelligence, God is ever ready to carry out man's smallest or greatest demands. Every desire uttered or unexpressed is a demand. We are often startled by having a wish suddenly fulfilled. For example, one Easter, having seen many beautiful rose trees in the florist windows, I wished I would receive one, and for an instant saw it mentally being carried in the door. Easter came, and with it, a beautiful rose tree. I thanked my friend the following day and told her it was just what I had wanted. She replied, "I didn't send you a rose tree. I sent you lilies." The man had mixed the order and sent me a rose tree simply because I had started the law in action, and I had to have a rose tree. Nothing stands between man and his highest ideals, and every desire of his heart, but doubt and fear. Nothing stands between man and his highest ideals, and every desire of his heart, but doubt and fear. When man can wish without worrying, every desire will be instantly fulfilled. I will explain more fully in a following chapter the scientific reason for this and how fear must be erased from the consciousness. It is man's only enemy: fear of lack, fear of failure, fear of sickness, fear of loss, and feeling of insecurity on some place. Jesus Christ said, "Why are ye fearful, O ye of little faith?" Matthew 8:26. So we can see we must substitute faith for fear. For fear is only inverted faith. It is faith in evil instead of good. And I should say, if you're you could replace him for whatever, pronoun you want, her, whatever else, right? It's just using man as a pronoun, essentially. The object of the game of life is to see clearly one's good and to obliterate all mental pictures of evil. This must be done by impressing the subconscious mind with a realization of good. A very brilliant man who has attained great success told me he had suddenly erased all fear from his consciousness by reading a sign which hung in a room. He saw printed in large letters this statement: "Why worry? It will probably never happen." Why worry? It will probably never happen. These words were stamped indelibly upon his subconscious mind, and he has now a firm conviction that only good can come into his life, therefore only good can manifest. In the following chapter, I will deal with the different methods of impressing the subconscious mind. It is man's faithful servant, but one must be careful to give it the right orders. Man has ever a silent listener at his side, his subconscious mind. Every thought, every word is impressed upon it and carried out in amazing detail. It is like a singer making a record on the sensitive disc of the phonographic plate. Every note and tone of the singer's voice is registered. If he coughs or hesitates, it is registered also. So let us break all the old bad records in the subconscious mind, the records of our lives which we do not wish to keep, and make new and beautiful ones. Speak these words aloud with power and conviction. I now smash and demolish by my spoken word every untrue record in my subconscious mind. They shall return to the dust heap of their native nothingness, for they came from my own vain imaginings. I now make my perfect records through the Christ within, the records of health, wealth, love, and perfect self-expression. This is the square of life, the game completed. In the following chapters, I will show how man can change his conditions by changing his words. Any man who does not know the power of the word is behind the times. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Proverbs 18:21. Got a few more pages here for you, and I have a commitment to read 20 pages a day, so this is part of reading those 20 pages. Get a little sip of coffee. I sell coffee too, so if you need some coffee, I'll sell you some coffee. Just put a little comment and I'll follow up with you. Sales, baby. Love sales. Love the mind. So, next chapter, the law of prosperity. Ye, the Almighty, shall be thy defense, and thou shalt have plenty of silver. One of the greatest messages given to the race through the scriptures is that God is man's supply, and that man can release through his spoken word all that belongs to him by divine right. He must, however, have perfect faith in his spoken word. Isaiah said, "My word shall not return unto me void, but shall accomplish that whereunto it is sent." We know now that words and thoughts are a tremendous vibratory force, ever molding man's body and affairs. A woman came to me in great distress and said she was to be sued on the 15th of the month for $3,000. She knew no way of getting the money and was in despair. I told her God was her supply, and that there is a supply for every demand. So I spoke the word. I gave thanks that the woman would receive $3,000 at the right time, in the right way. I told her she must have perfect faith and act her perfect faith. The 15th came, but no money had materialized. She called me on the phone and asked what she was to do. I replied, "It is Saturday, so they won't sue you today. Your part is to act rich, thereby showing perfect faith that you will receive it by Monday. She asked me to lunch with her to keep up her courage. When I joined her at a restaurant, I said, "This is no time to economize. Order an expensive luncheon. Act as if you have already received the $3,000. All things whatsoever ye ask in prayer, believing ye shall receive." You must act as if you had already received. The next morning, she called me on the phone and asked me to stay with her during the day. I said, "No, you are divinely protected and God is never too late." In the evening, she phoned again, greatly excited, and said, "My dear, a miracle has happened. I was sitting in my room this morning when the doorbell rang. I said to the maid, 'Don't let anyone in.' The maid, however, looked out the window and said, 'It's your cousin with the long white beard.' So I said, 'Call him back. I would like to see him.' He was just turning the corner when he heard the maid's voice, and he came back. He talked for about an hour, and just as he was leaving said, 'Oh, by the way, how are finances?' I told him I needed the money, and he said, 'Why, my dear, I will give you $3,000 the first of the month.' I didn't like to tell him I was going to be sued. 'What shall I do? I won't receive it till the first of the month, and I must have it tomorrow.' I said, I'll keep on treating I didn't like to tell him I was going to be sued. 'What shall I do? I won't receive it until the first of the month, and I must have it tomorrow.' I said, 'I'll keep on treating.' I said, 'Spirit is never too late. I give thanks she has received the money on the invisible plane and that it manifests on time.' The next morning, her cousin called her up and said, 'Come to my office this morning and I will give you the money.' That afternoon, she had $3,000 to her credit in the bank and wrote checks as rapidly as her excitement would permit. If one asks for success and prepares for failure, he will get the situation he has prepared for. For example, a man came to me asking to speak the word that a certain debt would be wiped out. I found he spent his time planning what he would say to the man when he did not pay his bill, thereby neutralizing my words. He should have seen himself paying the debt. We have a wonderful illustration of this in the Bible, relating to the three kings who were in the desert, without water for their men and horses. They consulted the prophet Elisha, who gave them this astonishing message. "Thus saith the Lord, ye shall not see wind, neither shall ye see rain, yet make this valley full of ditches." Man must prepare for the thing he has asked for when there isn't the slightest sign of it in sight. For example, a woman found it necessary to look for an apartment during the year when there was a great shortage of apartments in New York. It was considered almost an impossibility, and her friends were sorry for her and said, "Isn't it too bad? You'll have to store your furniture and live in a hotel." She replied, You needn't feel sorry for me. I'm a Superman and I'll get an apartment." She spoke the words, Infinite Spirit opened the way for the right apartment. She knew there was a supply for every demand and that she was unconditioned, working on the spiritual plane, and that one with God is a majority. She had contemplated buying new blankets when the tempter, the adverse thought or reasoning mind, suggested, "Don't buy the blankets. Perhaps after all you won't get an apartment and you will have no use for them." She promptly replied to herself, "I'll dig my ditches by buying my blankets." So she prepared for the apartment, acted as though she already had it. She found one in a miraculous way, and it was given to her, although there were over 200 other applicants. The blankets showed active faith. It is needless to say that the ditches dug by the three kings in the desert were filled to overflowing. Read 2 Kings. Getting into the spiritual swing of things is no easy matter for the average person. The adverse thoughts of doubt and fear surge from the subconscious. They are the army of aliens, which must be put to flight. This explains why it is so often darkest before the dawn. A big demonstration is usually preceded by tormenting thoughts. Having made a statement of high spiritual truth, one challenges the old beliefs in the subconscious, and error is exposed to be put out. This is the time when one must make his affirmations of truth repeatedly and rejoice and give thanks that he has already received. Before ye call, I shall answer. This means that every good and perfect gift is already man's awaiting his recognition. Man can only receive what he sees himself receiving. The children of Israel were told that they could have all the land they could see. This is true of every man. He has only the land within his own mental vision. Every great work, every big accomplishment has been brought into manifestation through holding to the vision, and often just before the big achievement comes apparent failure and discouragement. The children of Israel, when they reached the promised land, were afraid to go in, for they said it was filled with giants who made them feel like grasshoppers. And there we saw the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. This is almost every man's experience. However, the one who knows spiritual law is undisturbed by appearance and rejoices while he is yet in captivity. That is, he holds to the vision and gives thanks that the end is accomplished. He has received. Jesus Christ gave a wonderful example of this. He said to his disciples, "Say not ye, there are yet 4 months, and then cometh the harvest. Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields, for they are ripe already to harvest." His clear vision pierced the world of matter, and he saw clearly the fourth dimensional world, things as they really are, perfect and complete in divine mind. So man must ever hold the vision of his journey's end and demand the manifestation of that which he has already received. It may be his perfect health, love, supply, self-expression, home, or friends. They are all finished and perfect ideas registered in divine mind, man's own superconscious mind, and must come through him, not to him. For example, a man came to me asking for treatments for success. It was imperative that he raise, within a certain time, $50,000 for his business. The time limit was almost up when he came to me in despair. No one wanted to invest in his enterprise, and the bank had flatly refused a loan. I replied, "I suppose you lost your temper while at the bank, therefore your power. You can control any situation if you first control yourself. Go back to the bank," I added, "and I will treat." My treatment was, "You are identified in love with the spirit of everyone connected with the bank. Let the divine idea come out of this situation." He replied, "Woman, you are talking about an impossibility. Tomorrow is Saturday. The bank closes at 12, and my train won't get me there until 10. And the time limit is up tomorrow. And anyway, they won't do it. It's too late," I replied. "God doesn't need any time, and it's never too late. With him, all things are possible," I added. "I don't know anything about business, but I know all about God." He replied, "It all sounds fine when I sit here listening to you, but when I go out, it's terrible." He lived in a distant city, and I did not hear from him for a week. Then came a letter. It read, "You were right. I raised the money and will never again doubt the truth of all that you told me." I saw him a few weeks later, and I said, "What happened? You evidently had plenty of time after all." He replied, "My train was late, and I got there just 15 minutes to 12. I walked into the bank quietly and said, 'I have come for the loan,' and they gave it to me without question. It was the last 15 minutes of the time allotted to him, and Infinite Spirit was not too late. In this instant, the man could never have demonstrated a loan. In this instance, the man could never have demonstrated alone. He needed someone to help him hold to the vision. This is what one man can do for another. Jesus Christ knew the truth of this when he said, "If 2 of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. One gets too close to his own affairs and becomes doubtful and fearful. The friend or healer sees clearly the success, health, or prosperity and never wavers because he is not close to the situation. It is much easier to demonstrate for someone else than for oneself, so a person should not hesitate to ask for help if he feels himself wavering. A keen observer of life once said, "No man can fail if one person sees him successful." Such is the power of the vision, and many a great man has owned his success to a wife, or sister, or a friend who believed in him and held without wavering to the perfect pattern. If you're just joining, we're reading The Game of Life by Florence Scovel Shinn. This will be the last chapter I read today in terms of, let's see. Maybe I'll read 2 more chapters. Thanks for listening, if you're listening or watching this later. The power of the word. By thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned. A person knowing the power of the word becomes very careful of his conversation. He has only to watch the reaction of his words to know that they do not return void. Through his spoken word, man is continually making laws for himself. I knew a man who said, "I always miss a car. It invariably pulls out just as I arrive." His daughter said, "I always catch a car. It's sure to come just as I get there." This occurred for years. Each had made a separate law for himself, one of failure, one of success. This is the psychology of superstitions. The horseshoe or rabbit's foot contains no power, but man's spoken word and belief that it will bring him good luck creates expectancy, and in the subconscious mind, and attracts a lucky situation. I find, however, this will not work when man has advanced spirituality and knows a higher law. One cannot turn back and must put away graven images. For example, 2 men in my class had had great success in business for several months when suddenly everything went to smash. We tried to analyze the situation, and I found instead of making their affirmations and looking to God for success and prosperity, they had each bought a lucky monkey. I said, "Oh, I see you have been trusting in the lucky monkeys instead of God. Put away the lucky monkeys and call on the law of forgiveness. For man has power to forgive or neutralize his mistakes." They decided to throw the lucky monkeys down a coal hole, and all went well again. This does not mean, however, that one should throw away every lucky ornament or horseshoe about the house, but he must recognize the power back of it is the one and only power, God, and that the object simply gives him a feeling of expectancy. I was with a friend one day who was in deep despair. In crossing the street, she picked up a horseshoe. Immediately, she was filled with joy and hope. She said God had sent her the horseshoe in order to keep up her courage. It was indeed at that moment about the only thing that could have registered in her consciousness. Her hope became faith, and she ultimately made a wonderful demonstration. I wish to make the point clear that the men previously mentioned were depending on the monkeys alone, while this woman recognized the power back of the horseshoe. I know in my own case, it took a long while to get out of a belief that a certain thing brought disappointment. If the thing happened, disappointment invariably followed. I found the only way I could make a change in the subconscious was by asserting there are not 2 powers, there is only one power, God. Therefore, there are no disappointments, and this thing means a happy surprise. I noticed a change at once, and happy surprises commenced coming my way. I have a friend who said nothing could induce her to walk under a ladder. I said, if you are afraid, you're giving in to a belief in two powers, good and evil, instead of one. As God is absolute, there can be no opposing power, unless man makes the false of evil for himself. To show you believe in only one power, God, and that there is no power or reality in evil, walk under the next ladder you see. Soon after, she went to her bank. She wished to open her box in the safe deposit vault, and there stood a ladder on her pathway. It was impossible to reach the box without passing under the ladder. She quailed with fear and turned back. She could not face the lion on her pathway. However, when she reached the street, my words rang in her ears, and she decided to return and walk under it. It was a big moment in her life, for ladders had held her in bondage for years. She retraced her steps to the vault, and the ladder was no longer there. This so often happens. If one is willing to do a thing he is afraid to do, he does not have to. It is the law of non-resistance, which is so little understood. Someone has said that courage contains genius and magic. Face a situation fearlessly, and there is no situation to face. It falls away of its own weight. The explanation is that fear attracted the ladder on the woman's pathway, and fearlessness removed it. Thus, the invisible forces are ever working for man, who is always pulling the strings. Himself through he does not know. Thus, the invisible forces are ever working for man, who is always pulling the strings, himself though he does not know it. Owing to the vibratory power of words, whatever man voices he begins to attract. People who continually speak of disease invariably attract it. After man knows the truth, he cannot be too careful of his words. For example, I have a friend who often says on the phone, "Do come to see me and have a fine old-fashioned chat." This old-fashioned chat means an hour of about 500 to 1,000 destructive words. The principal topics being loss, lack, failure, and sickness. I reply, no, I thank you. I've had enough old-fashioned chats in my life. They're too expensive, but I will be glad to have a new-fashioned chat and talk about what we want, not what we don't want. There is an old saying that man only dares use his words for three purposes: to heal, bless, or prosper. This is the Prosperity Bible. It is 19 of the most, it's a lot of the books were written in like the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. This book, it's specifically called The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel Shinn. It was written in 1925. And I'm just reading a few chapters here. Hopefully you get some nuggets and some good stuff out of it. And it's just to focus on prosperity and abundance and speaking what you want into existence. So there's an old saying that man only dares use his words for three purposes: to heal, bless, or prosper. What man says of others will be said of him, and what he wishes for another, he is wishing for himself. Curses, like chickens, come home to roost. If a man wishes someone bad luck, he is sure to attract bad luck himself. If he wishes to aid someone to success, he is wishing and aiding himself to success. The body may be renewed and transformed through the spoken word and clear vision, and disease be completely wiped out of the consciousness. The metaphysician knows that all disease has a mental correspondence, and in order to heal the body, one must first heal the soul. The soul is the subconscious mind, and it must be saved from wrong thinking. In the 23rd Psalms, we read, "He restoreth my soul." This means that the subconscious mind or soul must be restored with the right ideas. and the mystical marriage is the marriage of the soul and the spirit, or the subconscious and the superconscious mind. They must be one. When the subconscious is flooded with the perfect ideas of the superconscious, God and man are one. I and the Father are one. That is, he is one with the realm of perfect ideas. He is the man made in God's likeness and image, imagination, and is given power and dominion over all created things, his mind, body, and affairs. It is safe to say that all sickness and unhappiness come from the violation of the law of love. A new commandment I give unto you: love one another. And in the game of life, love or goodwill takes every trick. For example, a woman I know had for years an appearance of terrible skin disease. The doctors told her it was incurable, and she was in despair. She was on the stage, and she feared she would soon have to give up her profession, and she had no other means of support. She, however, procured a good engagement, and on the opening night made a great hit. She received flattering notices from the critics and was joyful and elated. The next day she received a notice of dismissal. A man in the cast had been jealous of her success and had caused her to be sent away. She felt hatred and resentment taking complete possession of her, and she cried out, "Oh God, don't let me hate that man." That night she worked for hours in silence. She said, "I soon came into a very deep silence. I seemed to be at peace with myself, with the man, and with the whole world. I continued this for 2 following nights, and on the 3rd day I found I was healed completely of the skin disease. In asking for love or goodwill, she had fulfilled the law, for love is the fulfilling of the law, and the disease, which came from subconscious resentment, was wiped out. Continual criticism produces rheumatism, as critical, inharmonious thoughts cause unnatural deposits in the blood, which settle in the joints. False growths are caused by jealousy, hatred, unforgiveness, fear. Every disease is caused by a mind not at ease. I said once in my class, there is no use asking anyone, "What's the matter with you?" We might just as well say, "Who's the matter with you?" Unforgiveness is the most prolific cause of disease. It will harden the arteries or liver and affect the eyesight. In its train are endless ills. I called on a woman one day who said she was ill from having eaten poisoned oyster. I replied, "Oh no, the oyster was harmless. You poisoned the oyster. What's the matter with you?" She answered, "Oh, about 19 people." She had quarreled with 19 people and had become so inharmonious that she attracted the wrong oyster. Any inharmony on the external indicates there is mental inharmony. As the within, so the without. Man's only enemies are within himself, and a man's foes shall be they of his own household. Personality is one of the last enemies to be overcome, as this planet is taking its initiation in love. It was Christ's message, peace on earth, goodwill towards man. The enlightened man, therefore, endeavors to perfect himself upon his neighbor. His work is with himself to send out goodwill and blessings to every man. And the marvelous thing is that if one blesses a man, he has no power to harm him. For example, a man came to me asking to treat for success in business. He was selling machinery, and a rival appeared on the scene with what he proclaimed was a better machine, and my friend feared defeat. I said, "First of all, we must wipe out all fear and know that God protects your interest and that the divine idea must come out of this situation. That is, the right machine will be sold by the right man to the right man." And I added, "Don't hold one critical thought towards that man. Bless him all day and be willing not to sell your machine if it isn't the divine idea." So he went to the meeting fearless and non-resistant, and blessing the other man. He said the outcome was very remarkable. The other man's machine refused to work, and he sold his without the slightest difficulty. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which spitefully use you and persecute you. Goodwill produces a great aura of protection about the one who sends it, and no weapon that is formed against him shall prosper. In other words, love and goodwill destroy the enemies within oneself. Therefore, one has no enemies on the external. There is peace on earth for him who sends goodwill to man. I think I'll have one more chapter here. A few more pages. If you have any takeaways, you could post them in the comments too, for other people to see and get the gold. Like 4 more pages or so. The law of non-resistance. Resist not evil, be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Nothing on earth can resist an absolutely non-resistant person. The Chinese say that water is the most powerful element because it is perfectly non-resistant. It can wear away a rock and sweep all before it. Jesus Christ said, resist not evil, for he knew in reality there is no evil, therefore nothing to resist. Evil has come of man's vain imagination, or a belief in 2 powers, good and evil. There is an old legend that Adam and Eve ate of Maya, the tree of illusion, and saw 2 powers instead of 1 power, God. Therefore, evil is a false law of man. Evil is a false law man has made for himself through psychoma or soul sleep. Soul sleep means that man's soul has been hypnotized by the race belief of sin, sickness, and death, which is carnal or mortal thought, and his affairs have outpictured his illusions. We have read in a preceding chapter that man's soul is his subconscious mind, and whatever he feels deeply, good or bad, is outpictured by that faithful servant. His body and affairs show forth what he has been picturing. The sick man has pictured sickness, the poor man, poverty, the rich man, wealth. People often say, why does a little child attract illness, when it is too young to even know what it means? I answer that children are sensitive and receptive to thoughts of others about them, and often outpicture the fears of their parents. I heard a metaphysician once say, if you do not run your subconscious mind yourself, someone else will run it for you. If you do not run your subconscious mind yourself, someone else will run it for you. Mothers often unconsciously attract illness and disaster to their children by continually holding them in thoughts of fear and watching for symptoms. For example, a friend asked a woman if her little girl had the measles. She replied promptly, not yet. This implied that she was expecting the illness and therefore preparing the way for what she did not want for herself and child. However, the man who is centered and established in right thinking, the man who sends out only goodwill to his fellow man, and who is without fear, cannot be touched or influenced by the negative thoughts of others. In fact, he could then receive only good thoughts, as he himself sends forth only good thoughts. Resistance is hell, for it places man in a state of torment. A metaphysician once gave me a wonderful recipe for taking every trick in the game of life. It is the acme of non-resistance. He gave it in this way. At one time in my life, I baptized children, and of course they had many names. Now I no longer baptize children, but I baptize events, but I give every event the same name. If I have a failure, I baptize its success, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. In this, we see the great law of transmutation, founded on non-resistance. Through his spoken word, every failure was transmuted into success. For example, a woman who required money and who knew the spiritual law of opulence was thrown continually in a business way with a man who made her feel very poor. He talked lack and limitation, and she commenced to catch his poverty thoughts, so she disliked him and blamed him for her failure. She knew in order to demonstrate her supply, she must first feel that she had received. A feeling of opulence must precede its manifestation. It dawned upon her one day that she was resisting the situation and seeing two powers instead of one. So she blessed the man and baptized the situation success. She affirmed, as there is only one power, God, this man is here for my good and my prosperity. Just what he did not seem to be there for. Soon after that, she met, through this man, a woman who gave her, for a service rendered, several $1,000s, and the man moved to a distant city and faded harmoniously from her life. Make the statement, every man is a golden link in the chain of my good. Every man is a golden link in the chain of my good. Or you could say every person is the golden link in the chain of my good. Right, because man is representing a person essentially. For all men are God in manifestation, awaiting the opportunity given by man himself to serve the divine plan of his life. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Bless your enemy, and you rob him of ammunition. His arrows will be transmuted into blessings. This law is true of nations as well as individuals. Bless a nation, send love and goodwill to every inhabitant, and it is robbed of its power to harm. Man can only get the right idea of non-resistance through spiritual understanding. My students have often said, I don't want to be the doormat. I reply, when you use non-resistance with wisdom, no one will ever be able to walk over you. Another example, one day I was impatiently awaiting an important telephone call. I resisted every call that came in and made no outgoing calls myself, reasoning that it might interfere with the one I was awaiting. Instead of saying, divine ideas never conflict, the call will come at the right time, leaving it to the infinite intelligence to arrange. I commenced to manage things myself. I made the battle mine, not God's, and remained tense and anxious. The bell did not ring for about an hour, and I glanced at the phone and found the receiver had been off that length of time, and the phone was disconnected. My anxiety, fear, and belief in interference had brought on a total eclipse of the telephone. Realizing what I had done, I commenced blessing the situation at once. I baptized it success and affirmed, I cannot lose any call that belongs to me by divine right. I am under grace and not under law. A friend rushed out to the nearest telephone to notify the company to reconnect. She entered a crowded grocery store, but the proprietor left his customers and attended to the call himself. My phone was connected at once, and 2 minutes later, I received a very important call. About an hour afterward, the one I had been awaiting. One's ships come in over a calm sea. So long as man resists a situation, he will have it with him. If he runs away from it, it will run after him. For example, I repeated this to a woman one day, and she replied, how true that is. I was unhappy at home. I disliked my mother, who was critical and domineering, so I ran away and was married. But I married my mother, for my husband was exactly like my mother, and I had the same situation to face again. Agree with thine adversary quickly. Agree with thine adversary quickly. That means agree that the adverse situation is good. Be undisturbed by it, and it falls away of its own weight. None of these things move me is a wonderful affirmation. None of these things move me. The inharmonious situation comes from some inharmony within man himself. When there is in him no emotional response to an inharmonious situation, it fades away forever from his pathway. So we see man's work is ever with himself. People have said to me, give treatments to change my husband or my brother. I reply, no, I will give treatments to change you. When you change, your husband and brother will change. One of my students was in the habit of lying. I told her it was a failure method, and if she lied, it would be lied, or she would be lied to. She replied, "I don't care. I can't possibly get along without lying." One day, she was speaking on the phone to a man with whom she was very much in love. She turned to me and said, "I don't trust him. I know he's lying to me." I replied, "Well, you lie yourself, so someone has to lie to you, and you will be sure it will be just the person you want the truth from." Sometime after that, I saw her, and she said, "I'm cured of lying." I questioned, "What cured you?" She replied, "I have been living with a woman who lied worse than I did." One is often cured of his faults by seeing them in others. Life is a mirror, and we find only ourselves reflected in our associates. Living in the past is a failure method and violation of spiritual law. Jesus Christ said, "Behold, now is the accepted time. Now is the day of salvation." Lot's wife looked back and was turned into a pillar of salt. The robbers of time are the past and the future. Man should bless the past and forget it if it keeps him in bondage, and bless the future, knowing it has in store for him endless joys, but live fully in the now. The robbers of time are the past and the future. Man should bless the past and forget it if it keeps him in bondage, and bless the future, knowing it has in store for him endless joys, but live fully in the now. It's like the first one I'm making a little note of, but usually I'll underline. For example, a woman came to me complaining that she had no money with which to buy Christmas gifts. She said, "Last year was so different. I had plenty of money and gave lovely presents, and this year I have scarcely a cent." I replied, "You will never demonstrate money while you are pathetic and live in the past. Live fully in the now and get ready to give Christmas presents. Dig your ditches and the money will come." She exclaimed, "I know what to do. I will buy some tinsel, twine, Christmas seals, and wrapping paper." I replied, "Do that, and the presents will come and stick themselves to the Christmas seals." This, too, was showing financial fearlessness and faith in God, as the reasoning mind said, "Keep every cent you have, as you are not sure you will get any more." She bought the seals, paper, and twine, and a few days before Christmas received a gift of several $100s. Buying the seals and twine had impressed the subconscious mind with expectancy and opened the way for the manifestation of the money. She purchased all the presents in plenty of time. Man must live suspended in the moment. Look well, therefore, to this day. Such is this salutation of the dawn. He must be spiritually alert, ever awaiting his leads, taking advantage of every opportunity. One day I said continually, silently, "Infinite Spirit, don't let me miss a trick." And something very important was told to me that evening. It is most necessary to begin the day with right words. Make an affirmation immediately upon awakening. For example, "Thy will be done this day." Today is a day of completion. I give thanks for this perfect day. Miracle shall follow miracle, and wonders shall never cease. So just to repeat it, "Thy will be done this day. Today is a day of completion. I give thanks for this perfect day. Miracle shall follow miracle, and wonders shall never cease." Make this a habit, and one will see wonders and miracles come into his life. One morning I picked up a book and read, "Look with wonder at that which is before you." It seemed to be my message for the day, so I repeated it again and again. Look with wonder at that which is before you. At about noon, a large sum of money was given me, which I had been desiring for a certain purpose. In a following chapter, I will give affirmations that I have found most effective. However, one should never use an affirmation unless it is absolutely satisfying and convincing to his own consciousness, and often an affirmative is changed and often an affirmative is changed to suit different people. For example, the following has brought success to many. I have a wonderful work in a wonderful way. I give wonderful service for wonderful pay. I have a wonderful work